Hi, everybody. This is Sagar, Managing Director of Suman Food Consultants, and I welcome you all to a discussion with regard to COVID-19 crisis the food industry is facing, especially the challenges and solutions that can be put forth with regard to this discussion and an esteemed panel that we have. Friends, we do have an esteemed panel across the food industry sector today. We have representation from multinational companies. We have representation from national companies within the food processing sector. We are represented by packaging companies. We are represented also with regard to companies that are into fabrication and machinery of food machinery. So, friends, I like to give a quick introduction with regard to the panelists who are there with us. We do have an esteemed panel. We have Mr. Anil Rajput ji, who is the Head of Corporate Affairs, ITC Limited. ITC Limited, as you all know, is majorly into food and beverage products. Mr. Rajput has been with ITC for more than 4 decades, where he has held several important positions. Over the last decade or so, he has been heading the corporate affairs and has a tremendous insight into the policy making and suggestions with regard to taking ITC to greater future and greater heights. We also have Mr. Nitin Seth, who is the Vice Chairman of GD Foods. You may all popularly know his brand as Top. Nitin Seth joined the family business in 1996, starting with sales, and he leads the Tops, as you know, has won awards and accreditations throughout with regard to the products and innovations that they have done. We also have Mr. Jayesh Gosrani from Goma Engineering, who is the Managing Director. Goma Engineering caters primarily to the milk and beverage sector in the food industry and provides the line and machinery with regard to the same. Over the last 33 years, Mr. Jayesh Gosrani has played an active role towards the growth and success of Goma Engineering, both in India as well as abroad. We also have Mr. Aditya Bagri, who is the director with Bagri Group. The Bagri as a group is a 50-year-old lineage in food processing sector. Bagri, as you know, is one of the leading brands in India and caters primarily to the health food as well as breakfast cereals. Aditya has been driving the family-run business and is responsible primarily for the FMCG vertical. We also have Girish Bajaj, who is the MD of Bajaj Process Pack Limited. He is the second-generation entrepreneur in the company and currently is the MD of this 3-decade-old engineering company. The company provides plant and machinery on a turnkey basis to clients and companies in the food processing sector, both in India as well as abroad. And lastly, we also, and most importantly, we also have Mr. Amit Ray, who is the Executive Director with Uflex Limited. Uflex, as you may all know, is about a 15,000 crore company into packaging material, packaging machinery, coating, as well as chemicals. Mr. Ray has tremendous 19 years of experience, has been part of the company for 19 years now, and has great experience with regard to food industry packaging solutions. So with that, I welcome the esteemed panel to the discussions and look forward to a wonderful discussion on the subject which is related to COVID crisis, the challenges and solutions that we can talk about for the food processing sector. Friends, as we start this discussion, it would be wonderful to know from each of the panelists the current status of individual companies, of each of your individual companies in terms of operations of where they stand. So Rajput ji, if I can start with you, going with Aditya Bagri, then Amit Ray, Nitin Seth, Jayesh, and then to Girish. Rajput ji, if you can share some thoughts in terms of your current operations, where they stand for ITC Limited. Rajputji, your mic is off, I think.
Thank you very much, Sagar, for inviting me for this interaction. Yes. And for a very generous introduction. And I also like to thank all my co-panelists on this. As far as ITC is concerned, we have about 80 factories across India, which are currently in different size and shape of operation working. Some are working at about 20% capacity, and some are working to about 60 to 70% capacity. As everybody knows, that we have labor as one of the biggest challenge in the current environment from two accounts. On one, there are limited passes that are being given by authorities because they want to keep the labor availability on site to the bare minimum. And second one is that there is generally a fear factor amongst the employees who have to come to work. And there is also a peer pressure from the villagers and the nearby neighborhood, and they're also not allowing them to come to work. In any case, we are right now engaged in fulfilling the market demand. Our production from different factories are meeting up the current challenge. And we hope going forward, things will only be better.
Excellent. Mr. Amit Ray, if you can share some thoughts with regard to your operations, and I'll request each panelist to do so.
Sagarji, thank you so much for having me on this esteemed panel, along with all my other, esteemed panelists. It's been a pleasure speaking here. So, like Anilji also mentioned, we've also been in the food processing space doing various, work from grain milling to producing breakfast cereals and health foods. And we've got 3 active manufacturing units across North India, and all in different levels of operations ranging from 20% to 60%. A lot of that over the period of the lockdown, while we've been allowed to operate, we've had logistics issues, we've had issues of labor, as it was pointed out earlier. So a lot of this has been corrected now, and it's improving by the day. But it is a very dynamic environment, and there are new hotspots coming up every day. So we are monitoring it fairly closely, and we want to make sure that we are back up to capacity as soon as we can and serve the needs of our customers.
Nitin, would you like to share some thoughts with regard to your operations?
Hi. Thank you so much, Sagar, for inviting me over. I would just like to tell a little bit, we have 6 plants across 5 states in India, and most of the plants are working at just 10 to 12% of the capacity. One plant was permitted to start just yesterday, after 4 weeks of the lockdown, and whatever the central government says and what the district administration understands, there's a huge gap in it. So, they say 60% of the food processing plants in India are running to full capacity, as the Times of India reported today. But according to the food industry, it is not true.
Okay. Amit Rayji, please, if you can share some thoughts with regard to the operations of your plant. Amit Rayji, I think your microphone is off, audio on your computer. I think we just, in the meanwhile, let's just go to Girish Bajaj and Jayesh. Amit Rayji, yes, we can hear you. Yeah. Amit Rayji, if you can tell a little bit about operations of your plant, where they currently stand in the COVID crisis.
Yes. You see, our plants, because we supply, our primary business is supplying packaging material to food industries, food processing industries, health, pharmaceutical, and hygiene. Of course, so they classify as essential and non-essential. And we were permitted to produce. with very limited, now 1/3 the workforce. So that was a challenge to productivity. So we are operating. It's a learning lesson how with 1/3 the workforce we can produce something like we are operating something like about over 50%, 50, 55, sometimes 60% of our capacity. But that's one part of the story. We have had innumerable problems of getting the workforce to the plant. They have been stopped multiple times. And so things are better now, but there have been a lot of problems in getting the people to the plant. There's, of course, a fear factor. Those in nearby villages have gone. So that's, so far as the workforce is concerned, we had huge problems of transportation. Initially, we continue to have, particularly in getting the raw materials into our factory. It stops, you don't know, then you send chasers to find out where is the lorry stuck, what is happening. So this is impacting quite a bit. I know, we all know that it's not a normal time, so you will have problems of transportation, you will have supply chain issues. A lot of the labor force have left and gone away. Whether they will come back or they will not come back, or if so, when they will come back is a question mark. But as I said, there have been some learnings as to how to operate, to do more with less. That's the overall situation that we are in.
Thank you, Amit, for your thoughts. It seems to me the food industry in general is operating either at 1/3 the capacity or with 1/3 the workforce so much. What's the situation with regard to the machinery fabricators? Jayesh and Girish, if you can share some thoughts with regard to fabrication side, what is the current status in COVID crisis?
Should I speak?
Yeah, Jayesh, go ahead.
Okay. With regards to the machinery, we fall under both essential and non-essential, because we cater to the milk, which is an essential commodity. So with regards to the operation of the plants and the support system of the machineries, we were allowed. But that has just started last week, but it is with a minimum and a limited strength of people. But otherwise, as you know, till the bottom level, I mean, right from the central government, the instructions are not clear. But we are operating partially, just 20%. Yeah.
Okay. Go ahead, Girish. Girish, your mic is off.
Thank you, Sagar, and the organizers for inviting me over, and big welcome to all. So as far as the industry is concerned, as rightly put by Nitin, while the instructions from the top say something, how it percolates down to the DM level and the SDM level and the local thanas and the police people, it's a slightly entirely different thing. So for us also, while the permissions have been granted to us only about a week, 10 days back, but we're finding it extremely, extremely difficult to get the people back, to get the supply chain is totally disrupted. Major markets are all closed. So we're finding it very difficult, but we're just utilizing this time to just be able to support our clients who are somehow working in the food processing and packaging industry, and be able to give them some sort of a spare part support, which I think is the biggest responsibility as a company that we think we should be doing at this time. So we are kind of just working on a very limited workforce with a very, very limited staff, just as a customer support basis.
Thank you to the panel. I think the views of everybody pretty much answers the challenges that the food industry is facing, both in terms of labor as well as in terms of operations and so forth. Let's try to address some of these key issues also in terms of solutions. So my question is to Anil Rajput ji and Amit Ray. starting with Anil Rajputji. The industry seems to be having labor issues, which we all will talk about. And there is a concern with regard to the health and safety. So if laborers have to be convinced with regard to coming back to the plant, what is suggested from a point of view to ensure their health and safety, or what action plan can industry take to convince them that things would be put in place? Rajputji, if you can talk on this issue, then followed by Amitji.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sagar. Before I answer this question, I would like to preface a bit.
Yes.
We are not living in normal times.
Yes.
These are very, very abnormal times. If you go back 100 years in the history, this is the third worst economic crisis, or the crisis at the global level that we are facing. You can go back to First Depression, seen this kind of situation. Then World War II was a similar kind of situation, but nothing like this the globe has ever seen, where simultaneously this kind of pandemic has hit our globe. The planet is in a very, very difficult situation. So we have to see the current situation in that light, and our employees and the regulatory mechanism in that view. Otherwise, we will be missing wood from the tree.
Absolutely.
See, I must confess that India is a very large country. Our per square feet density of population is highest in the world. That being the scenario, the policy makers had no choice but to clamp down.
Absolutely.
Having clamped down, economic activity has suffered. People are also suffering, and they are also working shoulder to shoulder to see things get as normal as possible. In fact, we are all aware that Ministry of Food Processing during this time has been extremely proactive to deal with the issue. Now, employees are today on a crossroad. They want to come to work, but they have a huge amount of fear. They have a fear on two major factors. One is their own life, another one is the life of their dear ones sitting at home. Because if they come to work and tomorrow they get COVID positive, then they will not only get infected themselves, they will also infect their family. Now, that being the fear is creating a huge amount of challenge from the employee's perspective for us to bring them to work. Having said that, whether we are getting 50% labor approval, whether we are getting 20% labor approval, 30% labor approval, that is only an administrative issue. But having crossed the administrative issue, we are having a barrier from the employees coming and joining the work. Now, what we can do, at the end of the day, as Peter Drucker has said, money material can be available to all organizations in equal abundance. Ultimately, it will be the men who will make all the difference. So therefore, men become the most important resource for every organization. Now, in this condition, they are even more important. So what we have to actually do is to think from their perspective if we want them to come and join us. What we need to do is a very, very caring and nurturing attitude towards our employees. We have to ensure that we have an extremely safe working environment for them. We have to actually think beyond, not only for them, for their families, because when they come to work, they are taking a risk. Okay, and what we can do as employer to mitigate that risk. Okay, whether carrying this infection to their family or their own life, because if their life gets impacted, that entire family's earning also can be impacted, because he may be the sole breadwinner for the family. So I think we need to have a very, very empathetic point of view in looking after our employees in these times. They must feel secure and must feel that it is more than a home to them when they are in office. These are my few words for the employees' engagement, because money may not be the major driving factor at this moment in time to bring employees back to work.
Rajputji, I have to agree with you. Ministry of Food Processing Industry, Government of India, I think is one of the most proactive ministries among all the ministries of this government, and they I mean, I find that they have been right from the beginning, been, taking suggestions, talking with the industries, trying to find solutions, and trying to see how best we can tide over this crisis. With that, Amit Reddy, if you can share quick thoughts with regard to the same in terms of action plans suggested towards health and safety for workers. Amit Reddy, your microphone. Your microphone is off. Yes.
Now, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Please go ahead.
Now, I entirely agree with what Mr. Rajput said, that it is our responsibility, it's our duty, not only as people working in the organization or running our organizations, but to look after the people. Now, we have put in, there's a set of actions that have been recommended by government, etc. I think we have gone a little beyond that to ensure safety at the workplace, right from the entrance to the gate, at the gate, to all the steps, including spraying, including all that is required, hand washing, and even in the factory floor, it has been organized in terms of distancing between one and the other. In the canteens, then, you know, we are working 2 12-hour shifts as per permission of the government. So, you know, increase the frequency of meals for them, and then taking care to get, you know, for their town. Normally that is not done, but now buses with proper spraying, proper hygiene are going around, picking up people and dropping them back. So all that has been done, and all that is also known. We have had people coming from the district administrations to come and have a look, and which they have seen, and they have said this is absolutely fine. Now, getting people back. So in terms of taking care, in terms of hygiene, in terms of safety, in terms of compliance, I think everything that can be done has been done. Now, we can't provide accommodation within our factory.
Yes.
We don't have the space to provide accommodation.
Yeah. I don't know how practical that is also, but yeah.
Yes. Now, having said that, people coming back, bringing people back, I don't think is going to be that easy, no matter what steps you may take, because it also clashes with the agricultural season. People who have found their way back home in whatever way, how many miles they have walked or whatever they have done, this is the time for them to work in the fields, etc., etc. And they're not going to come back in a hurry till they're absolutely confident that this ailment of COVID-19 is over. Now, that's not going to be over in a short while. It's going to take time.
Yeah.
I don't see, you know, that one day the lockdown is removed, whether, you know, in a phased manner or whatever, that people are rushing back. There will be problems of getting people in most industries. But someday that will sort itself out. But in the immediate context, next 3 months, next 6 months, I don't see that happening. If they can find some way of earning where they are, in their villages, hometowns, whatever, they're going to do that. So we got to prepare for that. But again, we are strictly following I hope we are able to maintain it, because the economic impact of all this has been very severe. The severest problem is cash flow, because anybody you talk to will say, "Hamara to band hai, kahan se dega?" Now, at this time, cash is king. So there is, so we hope we are able to. We have not sort of removed one person. We have not delayed salaries. We have not cut salaries. That's the objective. Let's see how much we are able to achieve in this. So that's my take on what we are doing to keep people safe, what we are doing to bring some comfort to them, and again, what is the outlook for people.
Thank you, Amit Reddy. That puts me to the question, Aditya Bhavri, if you can throw some light to it. Mr. Amit Ray mentioned about the liquidity crunch, right? So the food industry, especially the MSME sector, is facing a major liquidity crunch. And I believe Government of India is also considering some kind of a stimulus package especially for the MSME sector. So if we can reach out to them, what would be the suggestions that we can make in order to ensure that the food industry, especially the MSME sector, can tide over this liquidity crunch? Any suggestions with regard to that, Aditya, from your side, as well as Nitin from your side?
So, Sagarji, I'd say that while we're not, economists or financial experts, intuitively, some of the suggestions that we'd have for the MSME sector, would be more around the current prices of working capital. I think if the single most, largest issue in the current crisis is the fact that working capital today is highly constrained, especially in food processing, given that it's procurement season for a lot of commodities. And we've been actively discussing this with Mokpi as well, where it's been procurement season for wheat grains or for mango or for heavy commodities which require procurement at this time of the year. And there are a lot of MSMEs who are just constrained because they may not have enough cash at the moment to procure and pay out to their respective sourcing points. So some amount of relief has to come in terms of ensuring that liquidity is passed on, and banks and financial institutions as well as other funds are directed in that particular direction to inject that liquidity, because right now is not the time to discuss the levels of collateral that you need to process liquidity. You cannot have a situation also where a lot of these loans are subsidized. I would in fact recommend that we have it in a sustained manner. There should be interest being charged with the working capital injection, but so that we're able to sustain this over a period of time. So that would definitely be one recommendation. Also, any discretionary spends, including on an operating side, if we've not been able to operate our units, fixed expenses on electricity, if they can be relooked at, that works as well as gives an organization liquidity to be able to buy more produce from farmers. So that would be one strong recommendation we would have. And I think it's the first time that we've had a situation where people are buying direct from farmers, and a lot of the APMC norms have been relaxed for the time being. So it's a good time to actually reflect on how these things are happening in practice, and if that can lead to some long-term changes as well. But a single point focus would be like you'd mentioned earlier, and Mr. Ray said cash is king in today's environment. So we really need to make sure that we're able to get cash moving from point A to point B, because currently in the supply chain, neither are retailers paying up nor are distributors paying up, and it all adds up back to the food processor or down to the farmer who's actually trying to sell his stock. So that needs to be addressed, and this working capital cycle needs to be put back into motion, and that's the area where we should focus on injecting some liquidity. And it should be done in a sustainable manner. There should be some amount of interest also that we as organizations are also responsible for. Nothing comes for free, and we cannot expect that the government can subsidize that. But at least the credibility for MSME should be lifted up in terms of getting access to this capital.
Nitin, as Tops being one of the brands, any suggestions with regard to handling liquidity crunch for the food industry currently?
Yeah, I second what Aditya says. Right now, the harvesting season is on. Tomato is going to come in another 5-7 days,
Also,
and
mango, I
yeah,
think, yeah.
major ingredient for tomato ketchup, which we have, and mangoes is going to come as another 10-15 days, which
Yeah.
is a major raw material for the pickle industry for us. Interstate transport is another thing because mangoes will be coming from across 3-4 states to us. So interstate transport is another thing which we want to look at. For finance, working capital limits have to be enhanced with interest, of course. I totally agree with what Aditya said. As an organization which is responsible, we don't want subsidies or free money, but we need liquidity because payments are not coming in from any part of the country. Most of the markets are closed, shopkeepers are empty, we are not able to supply to them. So liquidity is a major issue. Yeah.
One of the thoughts that I addressed in one of my articles was with coming out with some kind of a formulation where probably government of India can think of looking into average revenue in the sense that if you have to give out liquidity, if you have to put out funds out there, so companies can borrow probably just 3% over and above the repo rate from banks, and that considering a 3-year average turnover. And you can, if you have a 3-year average turnover, you can pretty much put about a 15% of your total average as a liquidity input back into the company. If government is willing to put forth, that can be one of the suggestions that I think would be also helpful. With that, I like to put my questions to Girish Bajaj as well as to Jayesh Goswami. Considering the food being recognized as an essential item, as well as taking in view of the high perishability factor associated with it, I think people are more and more realizing, considering the perishability of what value addition plays as a critical role. So, what kind of a farm level interventions would you be suggesting? And would you suggest a need now for moving from unorganized to organized sector? A little bit thought with regard to this, starting with you, Girish.
Right, Sagar, we all know that primary farm level processing is the very big key to the entire supply chain when it comes in terms of food processing. So, yes, the entire supply chain from farm to fork is what is needed. MOFPI on its part and the government like NABARD and other agencies have been fast working on that front. But I would say still not, it's the complete chain has not yet been formed. So the other day I was a part of another webinar where we were talking about agricultural produce, especially the horticulture produce, which is very, very perishable in nature, that getting rotted at the farm level already. And as Nitin said, we are looking at another 10 days or maximum 15 for the mango and also tomato. And these are very, very large horticultural crops that are going to come in. So at this stage, what I feel, and the industry being able to work not more than 30-40% efficiencies, and the other places also in a more or less long-term condition. So primary processing at this stage is very, very important. Now, what can we do now? I have a suggestion that, in fact, I also made to the MOFPI in one of the seminars that I attended recently in interaction with the Honorable Minister, is that across India, we have at least about 70 to 80 agricultural universities in each of the states. Now, each of these states have these agricultural universities where they have a post-harvest technology center, they have a post-harvest technologist who are stationed there, who've been teaching, who know all this. Now, if these people or this credible people could be utilized to somehow form the link between the farmers and the end consumers in terms of their inspection of the crops, of their ready crops. For example, right now transportation is almost in sense people cannot move from one state to another. And if I were to want to purchase, let's say mango from Ratnagiri, if there could be a local agricultural university which could be guiding us on that, that would be a good move. And also it could be guiding the farmers, those who are not able to sell their produce to the mandis or to the processing industry, if they could do some sort of a primary processing at the farm level. It could be as basic as pickling them. Mangoes are coming. If you, instead of throwing them away, could we pickle them to at least be utilized in some time or some form in times to come? Now, this is something that we need to do as on today. But as we go through this, as we go beyond the COVID, I see a huge interest or requirement coming in the industry as far as both from the government initiatives, MOFPI schemes, NABARD, even VC funding in this ramping up the supply chain from farm level, that is the intervention, sorting, grading lines, the cold stores. So right now, I think this is what best can be utilized from the existing infrastructure that we have. And as I shared, this is what can be done in the future.
Thanks, Girish. Jayesh, from your side, any suggestions with regard to the farm level interventions as well as the need to move from unorganized to organized sector?
The need from moving to the organized sector is very much needed during these times, because people have got more and more conscious. They have become, more health conscious in terms of the food, what they are going to handle, So automation is also required, and hence anything which is produced or anything which is sourced needs to be processed, and it should reach the end, the consumer, in a kind of an industry where automation and other health conditions are taken care, and the consumer is more confident of consuming it. So more of the industry has to intervene and try to do the automation in the processing section. That's what I can add.
All right. Thanks, Jayesh. Anil Rajpurji, my question is to you. It looks to us that the world is entering into a recessionary phase. So even India's GDP forecast is at the best projected to be between 1.5 to 2% for at least this fiscal year that we are looking at, while most of the world probably will go into a negative growth rate. So in such a scenario, for food industry to recommend as a strategy that can be adopted to tide over this recessionary phase in India as well as the world over?
You see, post-COVID crisis, this globe will not be the same. This is what is being predicted by many people. So what we will need is agility. Everybody will need a huge amount of agility and adoption. Adaptability to a new situation will be key to success. It will not be survival of fittest. It will be survival of the quickest. Industry will have to actually focus on micro. Every micro management will have to be at your screen. As somebody said, that our foot has to be on microscope and eye on the telescope. We should not lose the big picture, because this situation is going to create huge amount of opportunity for the food processing sector, in my view. But at the same time, in a short run, we are going to have challenges. Challenges would be in terms of changing food habits. Challenges could be in terms of the labor, logistic, and liquidity challenges that people have talked about. Challenges would be whether we can continue to operate in the current supply chain that we are operating. The whole logistic landscape is going to change. Whether we will have more automation or industry will move more to rural India. So these are some of the things that I see happening as going forward. So industry will have to actually prepare for new product formulation, depending upon how consumer behavior will change after we settle down from the current crisis situation. Whether people will look for more hygienic product, whether people will look for more value-added product, whether price will be the determining factor as we go forward, whether new packaging material will be the critical factor, critical success factor for a product being used by the consumers. So some of the things these things we will see going forward, and industry will have to quickly adapt to this new scenario post COVID-19.
Thank you, Rajputji. This is to Aditya Bagri as well as to Nitin. Taking Anil Rajputji's thoughts forward, we have a situation where companies are looking, or countries rather, are looking at alternate options to China. Obviously, we are looking, we were in a globalized world, we were working on a just-in-time basis inventory. And now, as the world is deglobalizing, especially in this, people are looking for alternative option. Now, we are competing as a country with Vietnam in Southeast Asia for taking that pie. Any thoughts, Aditya and Nitin, with regard to how Indian companies can, especially in food sector, can position themselves to attract those JVs, to attract those companies, and as government policies that can be coming into which would encourage those companies to set up their shop here?
Sagarji, I think Rajputji has left a lot of food for thought in this entire discussion, and especially, I'd agree with a lot of thoughts, especially in terms of, automation as well as companies taking facilities more rural, and how demand is going to shape up in the near future. So I think given the entire move away from China, the focus for manufacturing will be not just on isolating our manufacturing facilities, but also integrating. So a lot of organizations will look at backward forward linkages very closely wherever the global supply chain is highly dependent on one country or one geography. People will try as much as possible in every way to diversify their risk, and therein lies a huge opportunity for India, because from an agrarian perspective, and we've discussed this in several forums, even prior to these COVID times, that India has had a huge agricultural base, and it's a number that goes around fairly frequently in forums, that we have only 10% of the food that we make going forward is processed, and a lot of that is just primary processing that we do. So that statistic post-COVID will need a drastic change to actually be able to compete and take care of all opportunities, which may not just be from movement away from China, but also the fact that if we have to protect our farmers as well as the supply chain, we will have to primary process and value add as much of our food as possible, given that customers today would not mind having something packaged as long as it's perceived to be hygienic and safe. And the international demand coming out, even in many of the commodities where we compete with China, be it rice, be it wheat-based products, we can definitely put in our best step forward. Automation, integration, as well as scale is something that will automatically follow if we can get that pathway to demand. There's definitely a lot of work to be done on the regulatory side in terms of getting green channel treatment to execute a lot of these projects. Typically, entrepreneurs are very, very cautious in times like this, and rightly so, in putting heavy capex without having clarity on demand. But I think with the kind of base we have, and with some levels of innovation, we can clearly shift some of our primary processing towards more processed demand, where there is a clear need to have products with higher shelf life, have products which are export variety. Quality consciousness has been going up over the years in the food processing space. So there's a clear roadmap to actually lead it, and the Honorable Minister actually kickstarted the discussion in one of the forums that we were on, and I think she's been proactively trying to seek ideas on how we can go ahead and do this.
Yes. Nitin, any thoughts on your side with regard to attracting investment in this climate where companies are looking and countries are looking for alternative options to China?
Yeah, this is a good time now to diversify and automate the entire process chain, and we are also looking at it. And in terms of processed food, this is the best time for processed food because you don't need to go out very often to buy it. So the social distancing thing also comes in place because you buy a puree, tomato puree. You don't need to buy fresh tomatoes every day. So
Yeah.
processed food helps in the social distancing as well, and the requirements for people sitting at home who are working from home, taking care of the elderly and kids. So if processed and packed food is available, it helps save on time as that.
Lovely. Amit Reddy, a question to you because we are talking about the post-COVID scenario and how we are all expected to emerge out of this. So, looking from a packaging industry's point of view, what steps would you suggest for industry to emerge out of it successfully?
You see, there are two scenarios. One is the immediate context. In the immediate context, there will be, so far as essential products are concerned, there will be a spurt. Because supply chain is dried up, there will be a spurt. That's essential. So essential items may recover quickly. But discretionary spending is going to be limited. People will spend less, and there's surely no doubt about that. There will be, if you look at the total scenario in a larger context, there will be more unemployment. There'll be people will have the tendency to save more and spend less. And so what is so-called lifestyle products, etc., will take its own time. I'm talking entirely in the context of the food and food processing industry. Hygiene industries will get a boost, definitely. And it's not that it's only the period of COVID. Period of COVID is long, and it will now become a part of our culture, So, you see, there is no getting away from the fact that there is low consumer confidence, subdued economic activity, lower disposable income, and higher prices. So all this together, I personally see essential industries to spurt, essential requirement for essential items to spurt, and then to settle, come down a bit and settle down. This is how I see that happening. Rest of it, I don't see a very clear picture for quite some time. And we all have to sort of, look into every single thing, value stream mapping, this, that, what to do, what not to do. And we've already started that work because it is also going to be a matter of survival. Yes. So far as the, for those of us who are bound to sell on credit and buy on cash, that's going to be the principal headache. And if you talk about the farm sector, I'll give you an example which I heard only last night. I'm talking of Bengal village. People growing cucumbers. This is the season, they get a good price, but there is no movement from the villages to outside. The crops are there in the villages itself. I heard that cucumber prices is 3 rupees a kg. We are buying at 60 rupees a kg. Now, at 3 rupees a kg, the farmer cannot cover his costs, his pesticides, his work on the field, his whatever seeds, etc. He doesn't cover that cost. So this is a very worrying situation unless that movement, that transportation, that distribution takes place. The juice industry, big, medium, small, their products are not, there is no movement. Products which have a particular shelf life, it's lying. I think Mr. Nitin Seth will have much more knowledge on this subject and he would be able to say more on this. But the point is, product is just not moving. It's lying there. There's no distribution. So it's going to, let's not run away. It's going to be tough times. It's going to be tough times. But yes, yeah, people, I'm sure most of us will survive. This is a new thing to learn. So we'll see that.
About survival, I like to always bring the examples of Germany and Japan of how they got destroyed and they were in a worse of situations. I mean, we humans have, we are built to survive, I believe. And I also believe that everybody is going to come out of it. It takes a little bit of patience and it takes a little bit of time management and organization to be coming out of this. Thoughts from your side with regard to post-COVID situation for food industry? How is the food industry can be expected to be coming out of this from a post-COVID scenario perspective?
It will come back. It will revive. Food is essential.
Amitraji, my question was to Anil Rajputji. Anil Rajputji, can you hear?
Yes, I can hear.
Yeah.
You see, you look at all such global three situations that so far we have or we are going through. You see, World War First or the Great Depression time. During the Depression time, there was a huge drop in the economic activities and various businesses went through a harrowing time for a few years. So that was a survival time. Then it took few years to revive. And thereafter, until the World War II, everybody thrived. Similarly, you look at the World War II scenario. During the crisis time, there was crisis. Nobody could plan or think anything. Post World War II, there was a survival and slow revival, and thereafter everybody thrived for many, many years. So I see this a similar kind of situation that currently there is huge amount of confusion. We don't know which way we are all moving. After this whole thing settles down, and I agree that COVID-19 is going to be new normal for some time. After it settles down, okay, the issue of survival will be there. Industry will have to relook at, reassess, reorganize. Okay, the business model will have to be thought through all over again. But once we have survived that phase, there is going to be revival, and thereafter, and I'm sure everybody is going to thrive also. So let's all look at this a period which is where we are, grappling with all the critical, important issues, and there is confusion prevailing. Post this, there will be survival issue. I totally agree. Labor will be a problem. Liquidity will be a bigger problem because if you look at from labor perspective, I see the cost of labor going up. The regulation is going to be another challenge going forward. You see liquidity, it is going to be a problem. You see logistics, it is going to be a problem. You might have very many new channels of distribution. Some of the existing channels might change for distribution. Consumer preferences is going to change. Propensity to consume is going to be reduced. People, if they will lose jobs, then there will be no spending power with them. People, if their salaries are going to be cut, they will have reduced spending power. So all this state that we are currently going through, which is a state of confusion, once this settles down, the survival issue will come in front of us. But I'm quite hopeful, post that we will revive and thereafter thrive also.
Thank you. Nitin, this goes to you from a point of view of new product development. I know pre-COVID crisis, we were all looking at it from a point of view of launching new products, putting new products in place. In post-COVID scenario, what is going to happen from a point of view of new product development, new launches, or it is about for a year or two about sustenance, making sure that the core survives and comes out of it well. Any thoughts with regard to that, Nitin?
Yeah, the new product development is still on, and we are ready to launch around 25 new products and 5 new product lines. So we're just looking at the markets to open up a little bit, the retailers to start coming back in a fashion where they used to be working from morning to evening, not just 3 hours in a day. They are just trying to sell the essential items or hygiene items. Let the market settle down a bit, maybe in a month or two, and we are ready with everything. So it's a good time. We'll be launching it, and as Mr. Rajput said, we are also very hopeful that things will be better in a few days.
All right. Glad at some point of time things will be back. This is to Girish Bajaj and to Jayesh. We all know we are having labor shortage issues, and at some point of time, the industry would also be automation in a serious way. Any thoughts with regard to how the automation will be impacted in a post-COVID scenario?
Sagar, in my view, the automation amongst industry is the way forward in India because of many multiple reasons. One is the personal hygiene, food safety, wellness is the new norm. So whenever you and I or our family would pick up a packet, the first thing in their minds would be, is it safe to eat? So from that perspective, each of the manufacturers would have to go back to the drawing board and say, how can we make the food that we are processing more safer for our consumers? And that is where the automation starts. India primarily has been more, as you know, we were discussing in the organized and the unorganized sector. Only 25% of the food industry is in the organized sector, and that too in the rest 33% is the SSI and the 42% is comprising of unorganized. And this is where these are the people, if they have to survive, they have to sort of automate themselves, and the organized sector also has to ramp up their production. See, we are looking at the best case scenario, as I can see as of now, is Q1 is gone for everyone. We're looking at May 3, another getting extended and so on and so forth. So that means Q1 is gone for the entire industry. Now, if my company or any of the food processing companies were to try and even survive themselves, they have to bring themselves back on track in the next 3 quarters. How they would do that? Of course, expecting the production or the demand to come up, but at the same time, they would have to ramp up their production capabilities. And with the migrant laborers and the workforce not coming back anytime soon, the only way option for the industry is to try and see how we can automate, how we can ensure that the plant, food processing plant can run 24/7 or at least 20 hours in a day without, let's say, even with a 20% or a 50% workforce to associate. Second thing about this, Sagar, I tend to be a little positive at such times. While there is gloom everywhere, but I would like to strike a positive point here for all the viewers who are here, that while the entire industry across the globe is impacted, but let's be thankful to God that we happen to be in one of the least impacted industries. Thank God I am not in the tourism industry. Thank God.
Absolutely.
Thank God I'm not running a hotel, with no offense to that industry. But so food industry, as I can see, is going to certainly be back because that is the basic sustenance of everyone. So let's not be so gloomy about it. Q3, Q4, I certainly see a very good demand coming back if hopefully we have the vaccines and things in place. Another shift, a paradigm shift that I see would be in now would be the emergence of third-party manufacturing companies across India. Till now, people across the industries have always thought of investing into capex themselves. Now, as we know that king is cash, and let's not spend too much on capex, I'm sure there would be some people who would say, okay, can I set up a reasonably large manufacturing facility where I can produce for 10 companies? You know, a third party manufacturing facility for the food processing sector, which is linked to the farm, is going to be, I think, the next thing that is going to come, which is going to really boost up the back end support for the industry and also for the new startups. Now, new startups is also something that have to come in. Food again is a prime thing that is going to be in for the next 6 months or 1 year. So at the moment in the new startup space, we say only about 8% of the new startup are from the food industry. My perception is that this should go up at least by double. So within a year's time, we should be looking at least 15% of the Indian startups in the food sector, because that is something. And these are the people, the young people who we are expecting to come up with out of the box solutions. So from that perspective, I seriously feel that yes, in times to come, while the industry may take its time to settle down, but we are, by the grace of God, one of the least impacted, or would be the least impacted industry apart from pharma. And that is also evident from the bellwether movement of all the stocks in the stock exchanges. Barring the food and pharma, you see everyone dipping so low. But hopefully that, I think, and pray that that sounds good for our industry.
Thanks, Girish.
I'll add here, Sagar.
Yeah,
I'll just add here because as Girish rightly mentioned about the co-packing or the private labeling, because with the liquidity as a crunch and people not ready to invest, with the labor being difficult and reachability, meaning the long distances where the supply chain have to be met, co-packing it's going to flourish more. And you know, like people and food processors could always associate themselves with the other food processors in the other states and get their products packed and supplied. Like for example, we have one of the biggest juice plants, our own juice plant, where we've done a forward integration, and we are doing co-packing for 3-4 companies, you know, those who can't reach into the Bombay market. So I think that way the business would flourish definitely.
Thanks. One of the questions that are there is with regards to the avalanche of notifications that are coming in. So if you see, we have both state governments as well as central governments issuing notifications, but the impact on ground level when it comes to enforcement officials, they may not be aware of those notifications in place, and it takes a lot of time, effort for the industry to convince to enforce those notifications. If you guys can throw some light in terms of how that probably can be handled, Aditya, if you can share some light in terms of this avalanche of notification, any suggestions with regard to handling them, and Rajputji from your side?
So, Sagarji, undoubtedly the amount of notifications, has been overwhelming, and I think it's been overwhelming for us with a handful of manufacturing facilities, and I can imagine for Rajputji with 80 manufacturing facilities across India, it would be even more complex. We've tried to break this down and make sure that we follow the chronology of the notifications, because a lot of these notifications have been amended with fairly quick pace as well. So there has been feedback going to the industry. To give an example, one of our facilities fell in the outer periphery of a COVID hotspot, and we communicated with the authorities to try and ensure that we're legally allowed to reopen, and we were given good support from bodies like Invest India as well as the MOFP helpline, and to a degree that we could communicate with the authorities on the ground, get permissions to resume operations, and there were checks of our facility as well where they saw that social distancing and hygiene norms were being maintained to a very satisfactory level. But this is what we have to understand, a very evolving time. So every notification will have iterations, and we'll have to make sure that we stay on top of it in terms of understanding the state and the central notifications, what applies to us. The MHA guidelines are extremely comprehensive as far as manufacturing is concerned, and I think most organizations have come back with feedback saying that, it's almost impossible to follow each and every part of the guideline, but everyone should try and follow them as much as possible in spirit, and seek clarification from the local DMs on the kind of enforcement that will be done. So we have tried to work very much at the ground level as far as enforcement is concerned, and with the central levels wherever there has been some amount of disruption that has been caused by the notification. And it is very important to track. The government's been the most proactive that we've ever seen in terms of amending notifications, in terms of actively listening to feedback. And I think it's extremely important to give feedback when there is something which you feel is not logical in that local area, and in such cases it's always better, in our opinion, to be a little more conservative. So if you're allowed to operate for X hours, even if you operate for lesser or with slightly lesser labor and you forego some of that capacity, it is better to stay safer today than err on the other side of the regulations. So that's how we've tried to operate in a very simple manner.
Great. Anil Rajputji, a little bit thought about how you are taking up this challenge of managing notifications across your 80 plants across India? Anil Rajputji, your mic is off. Your microphone.
Thankfully, we are in essential goods industry, where government is very keen that the industry continues to function. Because of that, there have been frequent changes in these notifications, and at the local level also, to the extent possible, they have also been very supportive. But there is no shortcut to this. You have to remain engaged with the local DM and continuously work with them. Even if DM is convinced, the biggest challenge you face with the policeman on the street, because he does not understand any of your notifications. So getting goods across the country using your logistic support is a challenge. There is no doubt about it. As I mentioned earlier, that these are not normal times. These are challenging times. There is challenge for government, there is challenge for industry, there is challenge for employees, there is challenge for consumers. So you can list down that everybody is living in challenging times. So dealing with center state is a task, but I think I must compliment all the people who are engaged in this to come forward, help industry. It is the first time in the history of India that central government has been changing their own notification so quickly. And this is only based on feedback given by the industry. And I must actually once again say that Ministry of Food Processing and Mrs. Badal has been extremely proactive in their effort, behavior, action, in every which way, taking industry's voice further.
Absolutely. I believe we are already about 1 hour, 10 minutes into our discussion. I would like to pose a couple of questions, but one of the key questions from my perspective is, I noticed that Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi ji mentioned about the biggest learning from this post-COVID scenario is related to self-reliance, of how we need to get back into self-reliance, or self-reliance being the motto. So how does food industry see this, especially with regard to import of ingredients, food products or machinery? I would like each of the panelists to throw some lights. Rajputji, starting with you, in terms of are we looking back at the self-reliance days and looking at how to kind of mitigate our losses across different sectors? If you can throw some light.
You see, it is going to be deglobalization. From globalization, the whole globe is going to get into deglobalization. So this, in my view, would actually open new floodgate of opportunities for the entire food processing sector. We can now actually demand or negotiate, whichever word is better, to have technology transfer. You know, we can have new joint ventures in this country where people earlier was not willing to share their technology with you. They perhaps will be happy to share technology with you because you know they also may not want to travel as much as they traveled earlier. They also may not want to have their own outfit in the countries. So all the ingredients, all the various raw material that currently food processing is importing, I see a great opportunity for all of us there. All the machine manufacturers, you know, they can get into joint ventures and get into manufacturing of their own in this country. So from that perspective, also I see going forward that there will be opportunity. India is no equivalent actually, as I see. We can also, seeing the last few months on our food habits, you might see that people get into sattvic food, okay, that go back to the Indian traditional foods, which will become more order of the day, okay, and that might become a new health fad for our country. So I see host of opportunities opening up for food industry going forward.
Uh, uh, Nitin, if you can share some thoughts with regard to being self-reliant as a country, as an industry.
See, we have always been more self-reliant, and we have already backward integrated our ketchup manufacturing with tomato processing at Amritsar, and even gone down to the farmer level and got contract farming done for tomatoes, green chilies, mangoes, lemons, and many other items. So being self-reliant is the new trend. Yeah, totally agree with what the Honorable Prime Minister, Mr. Narendra Modi, has said. And we'll be able to do that. As a country, we'll be very self-reliant.
Thank you, guys. One last question, Aditya, I will end this with you, is with regard to if every country is going to look inwards now in terms of strengthening their own manufacturing base, ensuring their own. India is one of the few countries with markets, all right? So there will be a lot of countries and companies looking to access Indian market at this particular point of time. While they may try to put some barriers in terms of access to their market, you think food industry exports may get impacted in the post-COVID scenario? And Amit, after Aditya, if you can share your thoughts to end with that.
So Sagar, I would say in the medium to long term, I feel this COVID scenario has caused a fair amount of behavioral change, and I think many of these behavioral changes would be very positive for the food processing industry, especially for India. As Rajputji also pointed out, that people will be likely to travel less. However, people will also end up eating out lesser. There'll be change in terms of permanent behavior, that people have already started preparing foods more at home. We're seeing more and more recipes being exchanged. And yes, there is localization, and it's not just localization by country, it's almost hyper-localization by district and by state in India. So there is a lot of hyper-localization that will happen. Also, the way we are consuming goods is bound to change. In food processing also, e-commerce was a very small sub-segment of what consumers purchased, but now e-commerce businesses or like we call direct to customer businesses are likely to increase. What we're also seeing is people willing to invest a lot more in health and wellness and looking for a more sustainable lifestyle. And with all of these aspects, I think we're very well positioned, whether it is to create packaged food with a longer shelf life, or create healthy alternatives, or create products which can meet this global demand of just buying products and being able to conveniently prepare them at home. So factors of convenience, factors of health and wellness, factors of the fact that we have a huge agricultural base which we can rely on, are going to be great to actually cater to domestic as well as some of this global demand that is likely to come. Because consumer trends of late were all moving towards on the go. Every organization worldwide was trying to create products which were, easy on the move, things you could take back, have on your work desk, things which you could have on the move. Whereas now there's a huge spurt in demand for things that you can prepare at home, which are wholesome, which are healthy, which are well balanced, and which can last long. And people have definitely evolved in terms of taste. So not everyone wants to have the basic product. Everyone wants something more evolved, especially in the Western markets. So I think India is well positioned to cater to a lot of those global demands. And given our agrarian base, we can actually try and create products for those markets. So long term, if we get our act together, I think there's a lot of opportunity coming forward.
Thanks, Aditya. Mitraji, this question is to you. Same question. Do you think we will be impacted, any exports will be impacted with regard to the post-corona situation? With every country looking at their own markets, especially?
I'll tell you what my view is on this, our view on this. Number one, you see, we are fortunate to have a huge domestic market for foods, huge domestic market for foods and food processing. So that is number one. Number two is there will be stress on localization, whether it is food processing equipment, and we have developed a good base, engineering base in the country for that. So surely looking inwards will be a major thing, which the Prime Minister also said, self-reliant, self-sufficient. Exports, whatever we do, I don't see, except for the period when people will want more hygiene, more safety, more this, they will be suspect about things coming from here and there. I think, we have certain products which we export, not a great deal, but whatever we do, I think that will revive, that will continue. But good for us that we have a huge agricultural base. The importance is to support growth of agriculture in every way, and the important thing is we have a very big consumer base in this country to sustain the food processing and the food industry.
Absolutely. I really like to thank my panelists. It's been wonderful discussion with regard to the challenges and solutions that food industry can look for. And actually we can go for another hour if we really want. But we have a limited time. I think I've already crossed that limited time. So what I would like to now do is take some questions that have been posted on our channel and put that across to the panel. One of the questions we have received from viewers is with regard to debt charges. So when we are looking to export, I think there has been a notification not to charge any demurrage charges with regard to exports, up to. But I believe the carriers and there are companies, shipping companies, who are extremely hesitant with regard to that. Any thoughts with regard to export incentives that can be put in place? Anil Rajputji, your side, or any panel who wants to talk about any export-related incentives or with regard to the demurrage charges that are in place right now that needs to be held up. Anil Rajputji, your microphone is off.
Government has already issued guidelines on demurrages. And if somebody is having problem, Nitin Gadkari is a very, very proactive minister.
Absolutely.
You can approach him and I'm sure he will find a solution for it. And he's also MSME minister. I'm quite confident that some solution will come for this.
Yeah, we wish him well because he's also just recovering from a surgery, so we also wish him well. Any thoughts, Nitin, from your side with regard to export incentives that can be put in place?
not much. I can't comment much on that.
Yeah, Nitin, can you hear?
Yeah, I said I can't comment much on the export side because we are more of a domestic market operator, and 95% of our revenues are from the domestic market.
Okay, okay, okay. Friends, another question I am receiving is with regard to digital marketing. How digital marketing and online platforms are going to impact the sales with regard to food processing industry. Aditya, can you throw some light on that?
Sagarji, absolutely. I think, like I mentioned in my previous point, consumers are going more online than ever before, and e-commerce operators are going to see a massive surge in terms of consumer behavior shift. I think one of the things that e-commerce players have been investing in is customer acquisition. The entire COVID scenario has led more and more people to try and shop online for essentials, whereas most of the online shopping behavior was largely for non-food and non-grocery items. And I feel for most food businesses, direct to customer channels will be very important. I would say to a degree that you will have to invest in digital marketing and customer acquisition to bring people to your platforms or to other platforms, be it Big Basket, Amazon, or other grocery delivery platforms. And to give an example, there was a milk processing and milk delivery business called Country Delight. And after having a talk with their CEO, they mentioned that they were running almost at 90% throughout the entire lockdown period, and they have seen a surge in demand for people ordering milk online via their app. And these behaviors are not going to be something which will be temporary. Once you've changed behavior to ordering online, it's very sticky, it tends to persist. And customers will look at more avenues. So investing in social media, investing in digital marketing, I think is going to be a new norm, and ensuring that we do it smartly, because a lot of other channels will also be redundant for customers to actually gain eyeballs. A lot of FMCG companies spend a fair amount of money in trade, in shelf, on retail platforms. A lot of that is likely to switch to where customer eyeballs are going, and that is more and more online. We're all spending more time on our phones, more time on our laptops, trying to see new things or learn new things or engage. These are all opportunities to capture, and I would say it might even reach a level where we go direct to retail. That even retail fulfillment, like the whole deal that Reliance and Facebook have had, is at the back of empowering retailers with the ability to order products directly from companies and be able to supply them. So direct to retail will also be a game changer, where organized delivery mechanisms will come up, which are highly technology enabled. So these are things that we should keep our eyes open for, and people who adapt quicker. What Mr. Rajput said that people will be able to adapt more nimbly, change more quickly, are the ones who are better positioned to survive and thrive.
Thanks, Aditya. Another question I am seeing is with regard to, this is for Amit Reji, is with regard to the packaging. Some people are suggesting that in the post-COVID scenario, people would be looking for attractive yet cost-effective packaging. Any thoughts with regard to packaging trend in a post-COVID scenario? How do you see packaging trends in this scenario?
See, I don't think that there's going to be a great change in packaging scenario, because packaging has always been under cost push. Everybody wants packaging, the best of packaging at the lowest possible price. And so that is this. And, let's say a few months ago, and for the last year or so, the main stress on packaging has been on sustainable packaging. Today, there is less talk about it because plastics is no longer a bad word, but that's a temporary phase. We'll come back to that again. But packaging development continues to suit what ultimately the consumer wants. We don't supply the consumer. We supply to our customers and they supply to consumers. But ultimately, we have to keep track of what the consumer wants and develop the packaging accordingly. So I don't see any great change in packaging, trends. Packaging trends are already in that direction, and it has to be pushed further. That's it.
All right.
We got to do things faster.
I am going to pose this last question, which I am receiving to Anil Rajputji. Anil Rajputji's question is with regard to how the consumers are expected to behave in the post-COVID scenario. How will their purchasing decisions be impacted? Any thoughts with regard to that? Rajputji, your microphone, if you can, on it.
It is a very difficult question, and I don't think anybody has the answer. Post-COVID scenario, there are multiple things that can happen. One, there is huge pent-up demand, and that demand may have to be met. That could be one scenario, and that demand could be from multiple level of customers. Another could be that there could be huge downsizing in the overall economy, and that downsizing in the overall economy would actually have very less demand for the value-added products going forward. Expensive things will not have consumers. People will spend bare minimum, remain back to basic till there is a stability, job market improves, propensity to consume increases, and consumer behavior will then revert back to business as usual. But until then, they will not spend any money. So it is very, very difficult at this moment in time to actually do any crystal gazing that how consumer is going to behave post COVID-19. You see, you just imagine the number of migratory labor which has moved from different parts of the country back to their villages. Just imagine the kind of psychological barrier that they may have created for moving back to the various places that they were working in the last few years. So their income level are going to reduce very, very substantially. For you to find quality labor will be a challenge. Therefore, your cost will go up. Raw material getting to your factories will become a challenge. That will also push up your cost. So one side, consumer will want product at least prices. On the other side, industry will have challenge of additional cost and heavy burden that they'll have. Liquidity crunch would also increase your cost of doing business. So all these things are going to change the rules of the game going forward. So it is a difficult question. We will have to see as we go along. We'll have to suck and see.
Thank you, Rajputji. We are already 1.5 hours into our discussion, way beyond our time. But I really want to thank on behalf of Suman Food Consultants, as well as the Propak India team, to Informa Markets. We would like to thank our esteemed panelists for their wonderful, wonderful thoughts. The idea is to ensure that there is kind of a consensus emerging in the food processing industry, not just in terms of the crisis, but also in terms of the solutions as well as the opportunities that are to be emerging from this discussion and situation. Again, I like to thank my esteemed panelists, and for any viewers who have any questions with regard to the discussions we have had, you are welcome to email us directly either at Suman Food Consultants or to the Propak India team. Thank you again. Thank you, Arvind Bagri. Thank you, Nitin Seth. Thank you, Anil Rajputji. Thank you, Amit Rayji, Girish Bajaj and Jayesh Goswami. And
Thank you very much.
Look forward to seeing you again and towards more solutions that we can discuss for food processing industry. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everyone stay
Thank
well,
you.
stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You too.
Thank you, Sagarji. Thank you so much for moderating us so well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sagarji.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.